Azeroth is home to many dangerous bosses found in every corner of the world. While most are incredibly obvious and straightforward, there are many more that can be found tucked away in hidden areas or appear through a hidden mechanic. And today, I want to go across World of Warcraft and highlight my personal top 10 favorite hidden bosses in the entire game. These are just my own favorites, and there are so many more that we all would love to hear about down in the comments. So let's get started. In the number 10 spot is Anzu, starting off this list with a very simple boss that is more of a historical story. Anzu is the incredibly cool looking raven god who can be found in the Sethic Halls, serving as the second to last boss in the dungeon, but only in the heroic mode version of the dungeon. The biggest thing about this boss that most players know about is how he drops the Reigns of the Raven Lord, a pretty rare mount drop that players spend a long time farming in order to obtain. And I personally love the look of this mount a lot, because it's just like how Anzu looks. While you can run into the heroic version of this dungeon and kill this boss for a chance to get the mount, it was a bit more complicated back in the day, as this boss could only be spawned by druids for a while. Right off the bat, that is just a really cool idea for a secret boss, an interesting enemy that can only be spawned by bringing in a person who is playing a specific class. But that druid also had to bring in an essence infused moonstone with them in order to actually spawn this raven god, which is an item you got from druid only quests by a member of the Cenarian expedition, meaning that in order to get a chance at obtaining this mount, you had to bring a druid in your party who had progressed through the game enough to get this item. So altogether, a cool historical secret boss who has lost some flavor in recent years but still drops an incredible mount. In the number 9 spot is Yor, Void Hunter of Shaffar. Staying in the Burning Crusade expansion, this is another boss found in the Auchindoun area, just like Anzu, but over in the Mana Tombs dungeon. This is an absolutely incredible looking boss that resembles the iconic demon hounds found throughout the Burning Crusade expansion. Unlike Anzu, this boss still has to be summoned via a unique method and isn't a mainstay part of the dungeon nowadays. This is basically the final boss of a long quest chain that starts in the Stormspire Netherstorm and takes you to many different places and requires you to gain an increasingly higher amount of reputation with the consortium all the way up to Exalted for the final parts. But upon completing this long journey, you can finally spawn Yor when you adventure through the Mana Tombs. Additionally, I think this is a fun boss to return to given the fact that we are starting to focus a lot more on the Void and more specifically the Ethereals in the current story. In the number 8 spot is the Lurker Below, another classic boss that is just super cool to fight. This boss is technically the second boss of the Serpent Shrine Cavern raid, third if you count the elevator as a boss, but the only way to spawn this boss is to fish in the strange pool in the watery areas. As long as you have learned fishing, you can cast into the strange pool, and this boss will eventually appear, usually pretty quickly. And I absolutely love the motto of this boss, as it is a massive Cro'akan. These are some of my favorite creatures across Azeroth, and I love fighting them, like how you can fight Tethir and Dustwallow Marsh. But it's super cool to see a Cro'akan boss in this raid, especially since it is super focused around the concept of water, so he fits right in. Plus, having a random area that you can fish in and then you suddenly catch a massive boss that tries to kill you is a fantastic vibe as well. In the number 7 spot is Atal'alarion. Finally leaving the Burning Crusade expansion, let's head back towards the original release of World of Warcraft and dive deep into the Sunken Temple, also known as the Temple of Atal'alarion. Nowadays, this dungeon is definitely a lot more streamlined, but back in vanilla, this dungeon was truly massive, with so many different bosses and different corridors to navigate through. But one of the first bosses that you encounter is this massive troll berserker. When you enter the chamber you fight this boss in, you have to interact with these statues in a very specific order, and only upon doing that will this boss appear to fight you. The order being south, north, southwest, southeast, northwest, and northeast. Where the fight itself is, as you would expect, incredibly basic and straightforward, but I think this is excusable when you appreciate how interesting of a boss this is, given the fact that the Sunken Temple is already a pretty difficult place for most players to navigate, combined with this boss in particular only appearing if you complete a puzzle. And the number 6 spot is Nightbane, a more recent entry to this list but also an older one, and by recent this boss is almost 10 years old from the Legion expansion. And this is a boss that a lot of players like to kill because there's a high chance for it to drop the Smoldering Ember Worm mount. And originally this boss and how you get the mount were actually a secret that players had to discover. As you enter the Return to Karazhan instance, you get a timer where you need to complete a few different things around the instance to summon the boss. There are a few different soul fragments all around that you can click. If you can click all the fragments in time, and then run to Medivh to talk to him in time, Nightbane will spawn, allowing you to fight him and get a chance for the mount drop. Nightbane is the incredible looking fiery undead dragon who was once a blue dragon. Way back in the Burning Crusade, this boss also had a very similar vibe where you had to complete a long quest chain in order to summon this boss, which allows you to fight him. And I deeply appreciate that they kept this alive with the remake of Karazhan, making this boss another secret boss that you can fight and throwing an additional mount drop on top of it. In the number 5 spot is Gahz'ranka. This is an absolute classic of a boss, going all the way back to classic vanilla. The Zul'Gurub raid is one of the most popular raids in the history of the game and tends to be many players' favorite raid to rerun during vanilla. Many of the bosses in this raid are pretty unique and interesting in their own unique ways, and Gahz'ranka is one of them. In a very similar fashion to the Lurker Below, you have to do some different things in order to spawn this boss. You have to obtain Nat's measuring tape from elsewhere in the instance, bring it to Nat Pago, which then allows you to buy Mud Skunk Lure, use that lure when fishing in the muddy churning waters inside of Zul'Gurub, gain 5 Zulian Mud Skunk, then use the lure with the Mud Skunks, buy Nat Pago's camp inside of the instance to spawn Gahz'ranka, a 3-headed Hydra. And this fight is just super cool from the perspective of going on a little adventure and then ultimately fishing up an intimidating looking boss, and I think this just adds so much flavor to this instance. I'll also give a shout out to the version of this boss found in the Murloc RPG fan game, who is also pretty cool. In the number 4 spot is Postmaster Malown. This is a ghostly human found in the Stratholme dungeon, pretty close to the starting area through the main gate. And right off the bat, I love the vibes of this boss because Stratholme as a whole is designed around the concept of it being a major city that you walk through, except it was of course purged, and now a ton of undead roam the streets and occupy the buildings, plus some Scarlet Crusaders, but they are even worse. And in any major city, you would have a mail system, so having a ghostly postmaster is really cool. And you can spawn this boss by killing Stratholme couriers to gain the Market Row postbox key, and then using that key on 3 different mailboxes. The fight, like almost every other classic fight, is really straightforward, but he does drop a unique set of cloth gear that some players may enjoy earning. Where I do think having super unique armor or drops in general from a secret hidden boss is fun. A lot of newer players like to believe that Postmaster Malown is a reference to Post Malone, which no, he's not. He's actually a reference to the basketball player Carl, the mailman Malone, which is a fun bonus detail for this already cool ghost. In the number 3 spot is Endgineer Omegaplugg, an absolute classic of a hidden boss that I have highlighted on my channel before. Endgineer Omegaplugg is a hidden boss found in Omegon, starting in the Legion expansion, and was slightly hidden from the community until players figured out how to spawn him. If you make your way into Omegon, you can progress through the instance to the final chamber, where you fight the traditional last boss, Mechgineer Thermoplug. After you deal with that nuisance, you can go around this pillar and find a small button that says push me. If you obey its instructions and push it, this boss will spawn. And this is a challenging boss. While he was introduced all the way back in the Legion expansion, he gets scaled to the current expansion as each one rolls around, where you would typically want to bring in a group to defeat this boss and deal with all of his mechanics. And it is definitely worth to do because this boss drops an incredibly unique item called the Vial of Green Goo. This is a guaranteed toy item that will allow you to transform into a leper gnome, and I think this boss is just a fantastic example of what a good secret boss can be. A random enemy found in a random area added for fun that drops a unique item that players like to collect. A unique challenge with a lot of cool vibes. And the number 2 spot is High Inquisitor Fairbanks. This is a boss that I have just always loved a lot because I love the story going on here. Fairbanks was once a priest and a high-ranking member of the Knights of the Silver Hand who did a lot of stuff story-wise during the time of the Third War, and there's a lot of lore, story, and even a full-on comic that highlights this character, but ultimately, he's just a super cool priest. He was battling the Scourge alongside High Lord Alexandros Morgraine, but was ultimately betrayed and killed by the Scarlet Crusade after he witnessed and subsequently outed that Alexandros Morgraine was betrayed and killed by his own son, Renat, in Stratholme. Renat, who then became a high-ranking member of the Scarlet Crusade. Following his death, Fairbanks was tossed into a secret chamber of the Scarlet Cathedral, near where Renat and the new High Inquisitor Whitemane reside within the dungeon. But he had seemingly been infected by the plague and later rose as an undead, but still kept general control of his body. But since he was locked inside of a secret room, he was essentially doomed to exist there forever. If you go into the Scarlet Cathedral, you can go off onto the side of the cathedral and pull this torch, opening up a doorway into the secret chamber where you can then find a Fairbanks. And when it comes to this boss's importance for fighting or drops, he's not really important at all. But lore-wise, I find this boss to just be super cool, so he is important in that own way. Canonically, he's ultimately killed by adventurers, but you can still travel back to Old Hillsbrad and find Fairbanks there alongside a bunch of other important story characters. And finally, a small detail that is no longer necessarily canon is that players with the corrupted Ashbringer from the original Naxxramas can return to the Scarlet Cathedral, and part of the event that takes place here is Fairbanks being redeemed by the ghost of Alexandros Morgraine, where players speculated that Fairbanks would then be the one who sends players to Outland to begin the quest of cleansing the Ashbringer, but that never came to be. But now for the number one spot for my favorite secret boss in all of World of Warcraft, and I'm going to have to give it to Ra-Den. First, an incredibly condensed backstory, and do not get me wrong, there's a lot here, but Highkeeper Ra was a titanic watcher created by the Titans, similar to characters like Arcadus, Raj, and Mother, where Ra bestowed life onto the Mogu, who called him Ra-Den and basically worshipped him as a god. But eventually, with the shenanigans of Lei Shin as he rose to power and eventually conquered Pandaria, Lei Shin defeated and imprisoned Ra-Den within the Thunder King's capital of the Throne of Thunder. There's a lot of other stuff that happened to Ra and things that he did, but this is the basics of everything you need to know. A general summary is, he's just a super cool lore character. But during the Mist of Pandaria expansion, one of the main bosses of that expansion was Lei Shin, and one of the main raids of the Throne of Thunder, where you fight through this raid, defeating a wide variety of different bosses, and experiencing a lot of cool stuff related to Lei Shin, the Mogu, and Titan stuff. And the final boss of the Throne of Thunder is Lei Shin. But on the heroic mode version of the Throne of Thunder, one final boss will appear after players defeat Lei Shin, and that is Ra-Den. Now, the existence of Ra-Den being a boss was known prior to the release of the Throne of Thunder raid, but players didn't really know how any of this was going to go down. So once players defeated Lei Shin on heroic mode for the first time, it was a super cool moment to experience Ra-Den calling to players.
For millennia I have waited in darkness, in silence, pierced only by the shrieks of the tormented, my dreams a waking nightmare. I see the naive hope in your eyes. You think you are my saviors? Wring that mocking pity from your hearts and focus it inwards, for you shall soon know my agony. This twisted world is beyond redemption, beyond the reach of deluded heroes. The only answer to corruption is destruction, and that begins now.
Where this moment is a standout moment from the Mist of Pandaria expansion for me, and is one of the most popular raid moments in the history of World of Warcraft. So popular in fact that every single Race to World First that happens nowadays, people are always wondering if there's going to be a final hidden boss that will spawn after the usual final boss is defeated, always referencing back to Ra-Den from the Throne of Thunder as the most popular example of a boss like this in World of Warcraft. And if you do ever see a boss like Ra-Den again in modern day World of Warcraft, it will truly be an incredible moment to watch.
Wait! I am not your enemy. You are powerful, more powerful than he was even. Perhaps you are right. Perhaps there is still hope. But there is a yawning chasm of darkness beneath you mortals, vast, endless, and all-consuming. I do not believe that you can correct this doomed course, but you have earned the right to try. Farewell.
And that's my list. I hope you enjoyed. There are a bunch of secret bosses throughout World of Warcraft, and these are just my personal favorites. Please feel free to share your favorites down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video and want to watch a similar one, consider checking out my top 10 hidden areas in World of Warcraft video. I hope you all are taking good care of yourselves. Have a good one, everyone.